Hello, show me your meat. Okay, now that I got your attention, I feel the problem with modern social movements is that I feel like they constantly lose the plot. Like, I bet most activists can't even describe what they're fighting for or against specifically. Like, it's cool to say you're fighting against systematic racism, but what are you targeting specifically? Show us the boogeyman so we can rip its head off. If you're advocating for LGBT rights, what rights are you fighting for specifically? And if you're claiming trans rights are being taken away, provide an example of those things. Show us the boogeyman. If you're advocating for women's rights, what rights are you advocating for specifically? Show us evidence of the issue and what we specifically need to fix. If your entire cause just boils down to buzzwords, then you become exactly like those tards that call everything woke and being vague as hell with the definition. But luckily we have the woke detector that defines it perfectly and shows you exactly the type of bullshit these people are on. But at least it makes sense for those people to be vague, because the movement that was originally about forcing messages over stories and games got hijacked by closeted bigots who complain about leftist politics. But if you're someone who's genuinely trying to make a difference, at least be clear on what you're specifically trying to change and how effective your methods will actually be.
Even exist if not stream? Why bother?
Another issue with modern social movements is how social media elevates extremist voices to a point where the original context is lost. Take systematic racism, for example. Originally, it was meant to examine how racist actions of the past shape the flaws of our modern society that affects minorities and the lower class, like the effects of redlining. And somehow, the only thing niggas took away from that shit was straight white men evil because privilege, as if it has any relevance to the primary issue. White supremacy only serves as context to why those old policies came to be. That's it. The only conversation we should be having after that is fixing the issues caused by those policies. That's it. Problem, context, solution. Simple as that. You can explain an issue without othering or demonizing a group of people, especially if you expect those same people to support you.
An oppressive, fucked up system designed to keep niggas down and shit. Y'all wouldn't know nothing about that.
Speaking of othering, another thing I've noticed is how a lot of social movements tend to hold other groups on a pedestal as if they're the only ones affected by systematic issues. You may have noticed when I explained systematic racism, I mentioned minorities and the lower class. This is because the primary focus of CRT is how these economic policies started as a way to discriminate against minorities, but later affected the lower class. Hence why a lot of modern issues tend to stem from socioeconomic factors. Treating issues like it only affects one group of people significantly harms support for the cause because it makes it easier for people to weave it off as a not my problem type of issue, and incentivizes people and corporations to only show surface level support for a cause either for financial or social gain. Yes, I get there are some issues that affect some people more, but people are more likely to do more for a cause if you show how fixing it will benefit them. Take modern feminism. The movement would have done much better if they also talked about how the patriarchy negatively affects men as well. The culture of men not being taught empathy, not being vulnerable, tying their value to sex, leading to feeling worthless, issues stemming from a patriarchal view of masculinity. And the incel epidemic would have been a perfect example of that. Like seriously, that was a golden ticket. Men who feel ostracized from society because they failed to fulfill their social roles that patriarchal masculinity told them was necessary for their existence. Like, if modern feminists took that route, then I'm pretty sure more men would have had a more positive view of feminism, because you establish how their issues also affect men, uniting us against a common enemy. Same thing with homophobia, how the fear of being perceived as gay limits how men express empathy towards each other because those things are seen as feminine, which is a mentality that contributes to male loneliness, mental health, and our high suicide rates, which is a result of our patriarchal view of masculinity and how it demonizes femininity. So instead of painting an entire group as victims, explain how those issues affect all of us, because sympathy can only take you so far.
Booty, getting some booty is more important than eating food. It's more important than drinking water.
This one is specifically for the Asmongold crowd because these buzzwords have done more harm than good. Okay, DEI. DEI is an acronym that stands for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Its intended purpose is an attempt to fix the hiring gap between whites and minorities by preventing discriminatory hiring and ensuring one group doesn't dominate a field by having a specific number of qualified people from each ethnic group. I emphasize qualified because there's this group of people who believe companies just grab random minorities off the streets and place them in an office with a typewriter, as if minorities can't be qualified for positions, unless they're implying that there's some sort of genetic factor that makes specific people more qualified for positions. But I'm sure this account has the most wholesome views a human can have with the most respectful comment section. Race realists are getting their own video. Now, there are arguments saying that DEI is just reverse racism because they're hiring based on race, and I kind of disagree. It's more like communism where they're trying to give positions to every group of people by emphasizing equity over equality, but I do understand where they're coming from, because DEI only makes sense if you understand systematic racism and agree that it's a thing. If you don't, then yeah, this just comes off as reverse racism. Now, I'm not going to argue if DEI is a good solution or a perfect solution or not. I'm just here to explain. Alright, next is toxic masculinity. Now, despite what alpha males and shoe on head tells you, toxic masculinity does not refer to all masculinity, nor is it saying that masculinity is bad. What it describes is a perverted view of masculinity that harms both men and women. Views that promotes things like sexual entitlement, over-domineering behavior, emotional repression, and a hostile view towards femininity, which are oversimplified and perverted versions of masculinity. That is literally all toxic masculinity is describing. It is not an attack on masculinity, it is not an attack on men, it is literally just saying you are missing the point.
I know you ain't called my mama no bitch. Bitch, are you?
And lastly, it's the failure to debunk misinformation and educating normies. I'll use trans activism as an example. I feel a lot of their activism would have gone a lot further if they focused on educating normies and debunking misinformation and anti-trans rhetoric instead of reacting to memes. I say this because a lot of these channels often end up preaching to the choir, and if you have concern that your way of life is being threatened, you'd be taking your platform a lot more seriously. Like, the people you need to educate are normies who aren't terminally online enough to understand what the fuck a trans femme is, and most of their exposure to those things come from mainstream platforms that misrepresent the communities. If you truly wanted to help those people, you would inform, educate, and debunk in a consumable way that'll clear up misconceptions.
Here go another ball. Get used to holding them. Come grab him.
So what are the issues with modern activism? Failure to communicate a specific goal and solution, failure to educate, failure to properly debunk misinformation, failure in collective relatability, and failure to educate the right people. And I don't see these issues being fixed anytime soon because fixing it requires some form of social awareness, which is something many people lack nowadays, including myself. Now, if you excuse me, I gotta go work on the race realist video, and trust me, these people are something special.